Barry Gibb has spent 60 years on stage. But for 50 of those years, the real story was never found under the lights. It was happening at home, behind closed doors, in the quiet life he built with a woman most people barely noticed. For decades, whispers circulated about his wife Linda, about what she did behind closed doors, about a rumor that she once forced Barry to choose between the band and his marriage. Now, at 79, after burying all three of his brothers, Barry has finally spoken. And what he said about Linda is not what fans expected. Barry Gibb was born on September 1, 1946, in Douglas on the Isle of Man. From the very start, life around him kept moving. His father, Hugh Gibb, was a drummer, so music was already woven into the fabric of the home. Yet what shaped Barry just as deeply was a persistent feeling that nothing ever stayed settled for long. Even his middle name, Crompton, carried quiet family pride through a link to inventor Samuel Crompton. Still, pride did not mean comfort. This was not the kind of childhood that felt secure or steady. It was restless, uncertain, and always shifting, and that left something deep in Barry. It gave him an early sense that life could change without warning, and that feeling never fully left him. Before the family finally settled in Manchester in 1953, life had already felt scattered, and school never became a place where Barry belonged. In fact, he reportedly skipped for nearly a whole year alongside friends. That detail says a great deal about him, because even as a boy, he was pushing against rules that felt too tight. He was not built for stillness. He needed movement, noise, attention, and escape. What looked like misbehavior on the surface was also the early shape of something much bigger. The same restless energy that made school feel impossible would later pour straight into music and songwriting, and once it found the right channel, it became power. By 1955, Barry was not just singing for fun. He had formed the Rattlesnakes with brothers Robin and Maurice, playing skiffle-style covers inspired by Cliff Richard and the Everly Brothers. Then, on December 28, 1957, they gave their first professional performance. Barry was still just a boy, yet he was already standing in front of paying crowds. That kind of beginning changes a person. Long before most future stars even understand what performing means, Barry was learning how to hold a room and make people stay with him. In 1958, the Gibb family left for Australia, settling in Redcliffe, Queensland, near Brisbane. That move ended up reshaping Barry's entire future. Nothing was handed to them there. This was a period of hustle, pressure, and survival through performance. The identity that would later become the Bee Gees truly started taking shape in Australia, where the brothers sang in local venues and even performed at speedway events. They sometimes sang on the back of a truck for crowds who had not even come to hear music. That kind of setting can either break people or sharpen them. For Barry and his brothers, it sharpened them. It forced them to become tighter, stronger, and more serious. They were no longer just talented boys. They were learning how to win attention the hard way. Even while music was giving Barry direction, his personal life revealed how badly he also craved stability. In 1966, while still very young, he married Maureen Bates. On the surface, it might seem like a minor early detail, but it says a great deal about where his mind was after years of movement and uncertainty. Marriage may have felt like a way to finally pin life down and make it stay in place. But it did not bring the peace he had hoped for. The marriage caused distress for both of them, and before long they separated. What this part of the story reveals is not just the breakup itself, but what the breakup exposes. Barry was not only chasing fame. He was also chasing something steady, something safe, something that would hold. Then came 1967 and everything started moving faster. The Bee Gees returned to England carrying little more than demo tapes and a fierce belief they could make it. Their father had already been sending those tapes around, and when Robert Stigwood heard the material, he decided to take a chance. What happened next felt almost unreal. Their song New York Mining Disaster 1941 sounded so close in mood and style to the Beatles that some DJs believed it was a secret Beatles release. That mistake gave the Bee Gees instant attention and made them seem far bigger than they actually were at that moment. A single lucky break changed the temperature around them, and suddenly the rise no longer felt slow. It felt explosive. Right in the middle of that rise, Barry met Linda Gray. They met in 1967 on the set of Top of the Pops, at the exact moment when the Bee Gees were climbing fast and Barry's public image was becoming stronger week by week. That timing matters because Linda did not meet him as some unknown dreamer waiting to be discovered. She met him when the world was just beginning to turn its eyes toward him. Yet the relationship itself stayed surprisingly private. Linda was not simply a woman standing near fame. She had been Miss Edinburgh, which meant she already knew how to stand in front of people, carry herself, and handle attention. When Barry noticed her, he was not just seeing beauty. He was meeting someone who already knew how to own a room. Their first meeting carried a strange kind of magic. Barry later said they saw each other across the room and something happened. Linda remembered Barry coming over and asking her out for tea. It sounds so ordinary when said that way, and perhaps that is exactly why it feels real. Big love stories often begin with something small and simple. One memorable detail from those early days adds a touch of warmth to the whole story. They reportedly shared a private moment inside a Doctor Who TARDIS prop on the set. Two young people caught in their own world, hidden inside a television prop, as if time itself had briefly stopped. As Barry's role inside the Bee Gees grew more important, so did the pressure behind the scenes. Interviews describe a level of songwriting speed that almost does not sound real. Barry sometimes produced several major songs in a single afternoon. Behind the polished harmonies and soft pop image, the pace was brutal. Barry himself later spoke about how songs were sometimes written while the group was using amphetamines and alcohol to push the rhythm faster and faster. That admission strips away the smooth surface. Behind the elegance of the music was pressure, exhaustion, intensity, and an almost obsessive drive to keep producing. By 1969, the cost was becoming harder to hide. Tension between Barry and Robin had grown so strong that Robin stepped away and tried to move forward on his own. For the public, the group still looked successful. But inside, the balance was breaking. And for Barry, the timing made it even worse because his first marriage was also ending around the same period. Success was there, yes, but so was collapse. Then Barry made another life-changing decision at remarkable speed. His divorce from Maureen was finalized in July 1970. Just 6 weeks later, on September 1, 1970, his 24th birthday, he married Linda Gray. That timeline feels almost shocking because it shows how clear his heart already was. This was not confusion. He knew exactly where he wanted his life to go. Linda stepped away from public life after their marriage and focused on building a stable home and raising their 5 children: Stephen, Ashley, Travis, Michael, and Alexandra. She could have continued chasing visibility in her own right. Instead, she chose privacy, family structure, and calm. In a world filled with loud excess, Linda created a very different environment inside their home. That may have been one of the most important reasons their marriage lasted when so many others in that world collapsed entirely. Barry himself has suggested just how vital she was during the most dangerous years. He admitted that the group often relied on pills or drink simply to keep functioning. And he later credited Linda with stopping that pattern from consuming his life. One of the most revealing details he shared was that she would not allow drugs to remain in the house. Anything brought in would end up down the toilet. That turns her role into something far larger than the usual image of a supportive wife. She was a barrier between Barry and the worst parts of fame. She was the person who refused to let the house become part of the chaos. The famous rumor that Linda once issued an ultimatum forcing Barry to choose between the band and their marriage captured something emotionally real, even if the single dramatic moment was never confirmed. Barry's own words tell the true story better than any gossip ever could. He never described a big final confrontation. He gave details that were much simpler and far more telling. She did not wait for a disaster and then react. She acted again and again in the moment, refusing to let his life drift in the same direction that had already damaged his brothers. Her power was not loud. It was practical. She did not just stand by Barry. She made it harder for him to fall. When Saturday Night Fever exploded, it turned the Bee Gees into a worldwide force. The soundtrack sold close to 1 million copies a week at its peak. Yet that same success eventually became a trap. The backlash against disco arrived in 1979, and the Bee Gees became the face of the rejection even though they had not created the cultural anger behind it. Music that had been everywhere suddenly felt unwelcome. Radio stations pulled their songs. A group that had ruled the airwaves was treated like something people wanted to erase.